the information for the open, um, excuse, sorry about that. This is just a very quick review for the Open Note partner review for tomorrow. This is not meant to be anything extensive because ultimately the assessment is not extensive. It's simply us trying to take a look at some of the information and some of the content while also examining some of the skills that we've been working on pretty consistently throughout the course of this class. So you're going to see, again, just kind of the structure of this is going to be um, at this point 8, with the possibility of maybe one more um, analysis style questions. A couple of classes did convince me to put just a real quick matching section that we can use to kind of discern the basic information from some of these historical empires and historical conflicts that we've talked about. So I'm just going to choose kind of one basic piece of information for each one of them. Um, and then we'll go from there. And then in addition to that, you'll have some DBQ related skills that you'll be working on. Um, the again, kind of covered here in order to do that. Um, Another piece of this in terms of preparation that I would say solid understanding of kind of how these armies worked and what were some of the conflicts. There are some PowerPoints posted there that you can feel free to use. Um, you're really not going to see anything super content wise. So I wouldn't recommend going crazy with um, taking a lot of additional notes other than what we've already done. You're going to be able to use those notes in class, the things that we've done already. So it would simply make sense to kind of go back through and review those things. What we concentrated on in class is most likely going to be the things that we're going to concentrate on to some degree on tomorrow. In addition to that, um, I would say if you have questions, again, tomorrow morning at 7:15, I'll be in my classroom. You can feel free to stop by if you have anything else that you'd like to ask. If we'd like to conduct it as a formal review, we can do that too. Um, let's talk about content then. So, causes of war and impacts of war. We looked at a couple of different sources for each of them. Um, yeah, sure, I can do that now. So, conflicts and cooperation, some ideas that popped up on the two most recent um, historical conflicts that we talked about. Conflict means fighting, cooperation means working together. So, starting on a base level, what we're talking about here is for these empires, how did they use the elements of conflict? How did they use elements of cooperation? And some, but then in addition, for um, cooperation, he's instilling the continental system that you read about, where he's instilling his neighbor, or excuse me, his relatives in charge of these different nations and expect cooperation as a way to ensure the stability of his empire. Same thing goes for the Ottomans. These are multicultural empires for the most part, which means it's not just one select group of people throughout the entirety of the empire. So if you threaten everyone with, do what we say, or else we were going to kill you, that's not going to lead to a very stable and substantial amount of time. The Ottomans are talking about those two individual questions. And to give you an example, it's an analysis of war look like, how examples if you want, but about the Romans, very 1800s to 1800s, might we say that cooperation has changed over in the 800s or so? It's based primarily within religion, but the Ottoman Empire is so much more extensive than that. You have these regional governors, basically. You have these um, the main like impressive fighting force is the Janissaries, and they're originally Christians, and so you have this element of religions going back and forth. Um, you want to be able, again, there's not necessarily tried to get you out of the mindset of stop thinking what is the one answer and instead consider how might I be able to argue this from different perspectives. That's a much more important social studies skill than just memorizing. um, I want to ramble on here for about another 10 minutes or so and see if anything else pops up. It in this way, why I'm doing it in this way. I gave you the impressions. Yeah, things happen when they do historically. Looking for things that continue from time period to time period and things that change, looking at evolution of things, social studies themes through time periods. Um, understanding people, understanding where places are and the relationship between them, looking at people who are game changers throughout history. These are all skills that we said, oh, we want our kids to be able to do. And so, what I'm trying to here's how you do it, and here are some examples of that. So, I get that it's a different way of thinking with these stimulus style questions. I do understand that. But at the same time, this is really important to us. And this is important to us as experts in the content area and experts as teachers as well. And so I hope that you don't think I'm just, oh, this is just an honors course, so I'm just making it hard. Um, these are things that we've actually identified and we're trying to help you to be able to do because we felt that they have long lasting implications far beyond simply my classroom or next year's class or class. Let's talk a little bit about the different battles. So, Battle of Zama is Rome. That's during the Punic Wars. That's Rome versus Carthage, and the result of the Battle of Zama, or one of the results, message. The end result of the Battle of Zama is the destruction of Carthage. Carthage is no longer a power or really anything of note in history. Um, a piece of that is that Rome now becomes by far the dominant empire within the region. Um, I think that the way that I've always kind of tried to conceptualize this is um, putting things. I was a U.S. based history person, and so sometimes putting things in based in U.S. history can be helpful for our understanding. And this would be similar to the United States kind of post World War One. World War One into World War One, the United States is not a world power. It doesn't become a world power really until the economics. Even though I know it's going to go into the Great Depression eventually, but the economics of um, post-war and post-war United States versus post-war Europe, and the U.S.'s influence. I'll be honest with you, the U.S.'s influence during World War One isn't that great, but for Rome, it's very localized, right? It's extremely localized. It's not um, anything other than the boot, and it's starting to expand in some different areas, very kind of briefly. But for the most part, it's not until the Punic Wars that we see Rome become a true powerhouse in the region. And so the Battle of Zama is this indication, it's this turning point. So as we talk about continuity and change over time, here's a conflict that we can use and say Rome is learning from previous conflicts, and as a result, Rome is now becoming the preeminent empire in the region. So that's kind of how we want to think of these. We know from a tactical perspective that it is a traditionally Roman thing, the order and the organization of the legions, how they were used, etc. And the Battle of Zama is again one of those really good indications of that. Just like we talked about, the Battle of Mohi is a really Mongolian battle. It's using all of the expertise at their disposal. Um, that's kind of why we're looking at battles in particular. It's not a military history course, right? So we want to think about the big picture here and why these things matter. Right. I'll be around for another couple of minutes. I'll do another like 5 minutes or something like that. And if you need something, obviously just shout. But otherwise, we can just hang out. Um, I don't know if it matters to you. There's a Flyers game on tonight. Flyers making some headway in the Eastern Conference for the first time in I don't know how long, but they're making some noise. So good for them. Um, got the musical coming up this week. First paying show is going to be Friday. So if you get a chance, I strongly recommend you check it out. Big Adams Family fan. Um, I like dark humor. I always liked, and I get that it was a little kitschy, but I like um, the Munsters. Big fan of the Munsters. Um, so I think the Adams Family is going to be really enjoyable. Where we're headed with this, again, as I mentioned, is kind of World War One. So this is our, I don't know, you could look at it as the back half of contextualization for this unit. Now that we've kind of identified some of the things to look for with conflict and cooperation, now we want to start making our way into the present. And so once we're through here, we're gonna look at some artwork from the time period French Revolution we started to. We'll refresh that and look at as it moves from neoclassic works into Romanticism. We'll also look at, as I have on the end of here, 19th century isms, and they are movements from the 1800s. And we're going to use that to get us from Napoleon all the way up to the beginnings of World War One. It's probably going to take us 2 days, like Friday into Monday, depending upon how things go. But it's going to be helpful in understanding why World War One happens and why World War One happens when it does, and that's the contextualization piece. So we'll be taking a look at that. Um, as I mentioned before, and I've mentioned numerous times, if you are not sure why we're doing a particular thing, um, please let me know because there's always a larger plan at play, and there's always a reason behind why we do everything. So something like this, if you're like, why are we studying? Why are we going back into the ancient world? Um, my answer is going to probably be more in depth than just because the curriculum tells us to. So if you have any questions like that, feel free to ask. In case you're wondering, drinking some coffee with some protein powder in it tonight. That's the drink of choice. Sure, a lot of you were really curious, really hopeful. All right, I'm going to wrap things up here. Any last questions? I'll give you about a minute or so to ask, but I think that I think with the limited amount of people who are in here right now, I think this is probably good. Again, 7:15 tomorrow. If you need anything, feel free to stop by. And if there's a group of us and you want to do like a more coordinated review and hey, here are the things we want, please just let me know. If you're studying tonight, some thoughts, shoot me an email. I'll probably be answering and working on some things until around 10. And yeah, if you need anything, just let me know. Thanks a lot for stopping by. If you're watching this later after the fact, if something didn't jive with what you learned, please definitely send me some sort of message via email or remind, and we'll go from there. Thanks.